My next Patreon question is from Benjamin, who wants to know my ideas for classic stories Disney should adapt. Are there any fairy tales you'd like to see be made by Disney? That's an interesting question. There are a few stories that come to mind that would make for entertaining Disney movies, especially if they were produced by their animation studio. One I've long thought had a lot of promise is the Pie Piper of Hamelin. Disney had previously adapted this story as a silly symphony short in 1933, but I think it can also work as a feature film. It's a tale of a lot of thematic potential, and some creative directions that could be taken. A different idea would be telling the story from the point of view of the rats. Has anyone ever tried taking that approach? Throw in some songs written by Robert and Kristen Anson Lopez, and it could make for an entertaining film. Speaking of the Lopezes, they wrote the song for a Disney animated film that was apparently far enough along that there was an in-joke to it in Zootopia. I'm of course talking about Gigantic, which is unfortunately no longer in production. Based on Jack and the Beanstalk, I think it had a lot of promise with its Spanish setting, and the major change to the fairy tale being Jack befriending the giant. The concept art released was quite lovely, but I guess we won't know what truly led to the movie being cancelled. With that said, I don't believe any animated movie ever stays dead at Disney, so who knows? Maybe we put back into development someday. I should mention my favorite Disney animated film of the current era is The Princess and the Frog, which took some inspiration from the Frog Prince fairy tale while setting it in 1920s New Orleans. So maybe there's another fairy tale they could switch to a 20th or 21st century setting, like perhaps The Princess and the Pea or Rumpelstiltskin. If you'll forgive me going on a tangent a bit, when I was thinking about this question, I realized Disney animation has largely moved away from adapting fairy tales. Think about it. In the last decade, they've only adapted two, Rapunzel and the Snow Queen. You would think after the enormous success of Frozen they would make more, but that does not seem to be the case. I'm sure hardcore Disney purists will say moving away from adapting fairy tales is representative of the studio losing their identity, but I disagree. I actually think it shows remarkable restraint. They are looking for other stories beyond classics. It's good there is some variety in their projects, and that the studio is interested in pursuing original stories. Since Frozen, Disney Animation has produced a comic book adaptation, 2 sequels, and 2 original ideas not based on pre-existing material. Meanwhile, their next 2 movies are Raya and the Last Dragon and a currently untitled film set in Colombia, both of which are original concepts. Of course, we're still early into Jennifer Lee's tenure running the studio, so maybe she'll greenlight fairy tale adaptations in the future, but we'll have to wait and see. As I mentioned though, the possibility always exists for cancelled animated projects to be revisited. Think about how long it took The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Frozen to reach the screen. Maybe something in the Disney archives will strike a director's fancy. Raynard the Fox was considered as a potential animated film in the 30s, though it eventually morphed into Robin Hood. But Disney does seem to do well in foxes, so the studio could give it another try. There was also an attempt made to adapt Don Quixote, and that could still be done, especially with all the research on Spain already conducted for Gigantic. Homer's Odyssey was announced in the 90s, although it never happened, probably because of Hercules being made instead. Yet I think Disney could still find a way to adapt the story in a bold and dramatic way. However, like I said, Disney seems to be venturing away from classic stories at the moment. The studio has had a really impressive winning streak lately, so I'm sure whichever project goes down the pipeline next will be a good one. Now let me know in the comments what fairy tales and classic stories you would like to see Disney adapt, and thank you for your question, Benjamin.